Okay, good morning everybody up here on the first floor. Thank you for joining us. My name is James, I'm here from LTSB and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do, and then I've got three of the young people who've worked with us over the past few years. Will probably be a lot more interesting than I am talking to you about their experiences as apprentices. So what do we do at LTSB? We work with young people from cities including Birmingham, also London, Manchester, Liverpool, Edinburgh, etc., quite a lot of the major cities in the UK. And we work to get young people opportunities with major employers. So we've got on the stage with us people representing companies like NatWest, Grant Thornton, RSM, major finance firms. We work with legal firms, digital apprenticeships, that sort of thing. And we help young people to get into opportunities that otherwise can be quite difficult to access. So what I'm going to be doing is speaking to the young people here on the stage and asking them some questions about their experiences, because I think that's much more interesting than hearing from me about what we do. So, first of all, let me introduce our panel. We've got, in order from right to left, we've got Eunice, who's at NatWest, who went through our programme last year, and then we've got Max, who's at Grant Thornton, who went through in 2019, so you've been there for a little while. And then we've got Liv, who went through also in 2019, but had to wait a little bit of time to actually start the job because, hey, a pandemic happened, which nobody had thought was going to take place. So might just ask what that was like, having to wait for the job itself to start. So first of all, I guess the main question that we have is, why did you guys choose to go down an apprenticeship route? What are the advantages that you found of an apprenticeship versus trying to access a job kind of the normal way? Max, can I come to you first, please?
So I think the main thing for me when looking to do an apprenticeship rather than going to university was, I think the student debt was the main thing. £50,000-60,000 worth of student debt didn't really appeal to me. I thought that I'd have to go through university and do, say, a business management degree and then actually move on and do a similar apprenticeship as a graduate. So I thought, what was the point in going as a graduate? I might as well go first in as a school leaver and kind of get a head start on all the graduates. And I think that's a really key thing when you look at the workplace, is that in my 2 years prior to a graduate joining, I have 2 years on the job training compared to what a graduate would come in as. So as though you're, I guess, the same level in your exams, you're actually far greater experience than them in your actual work day to day. So I think that's the main advantage for me in doing an apprenticeship.
And in terms of that kind of balance of gaining the skills but not coming out with debt, have you compared notes with some of the people who went through school at the same time as you? Do you feel like have you actually seen that advantage in reality?
Yeah, I think the main thing for me is, like, my friends at university, I guess they're quite financially strained on the things that they can do, like going out and stuff, whereas I've just bought a house, and I'm 21, so it's a bit of a different lifestyle to the people that I went to school with, so it's a very, very good advantage.
So I kind of wish I had my time over again. I might have chosen a different route, to be honest. So Liv, how about yourself? So your journey's slightly different in that you had to wait a little bit of time before your apprenticeship itself started. But why did you choose this path? What drew you to LTSB and then into the apprenticeship path itself?
So I think pretty similar to Max, the debt. And like I said, you have the experience, like the on-the-job training before people come in from graduating, and a lot of the grads that come in as well don't come from kind of a financial background. We've got people who've done history degrees, biology degrees, chemistry degrees, so there's a massive range, and then they're kind of starting fresh almost. I think kind of what drew me to LTSB the most was the experiences and the skills that you gained that could prepare you to then go into the apprenticeship, knowing how to answer interview questions, how to kind of present yourself and how to talk to different people.
So we did all sorts of things around typical interview techniques. In your case, we did a lot to kind of work on those other employability skills and things like making sure you got a really polished CV and that sort of thing. But we also did other activities as well, which in the year that you two went through, this was before the pandemic hit, so we could do things in person. So can you remember some of the things that we did? I remember we went to and did some stuff at Villa Park, for instance, with some sports type activities as well. What do you remember from those days?
Do you know the one thing that I remember, which I think you'll remember this as well, I think it was the first one of the first days, and we went to the museum, and we had to bring an item, and we had to stand and speak about the item. I remember that really sticks in my mind. And then I remember going to London to do the Women in Business event, and getting to meet so many different people and network around that. And then Liverpool, when we got to go to Liverpool, and we went to Anfield, and we did, I think it was negotiating.
It was.
A negotiating day with the other cohorts from Manchester, Liverpool and London. So those are the three that kind of stick in my mind.
So these things are basically activities that we do to try and build people's confidence so that when you're going into employers for interviews, particularly major employers like Grant Thornton, RSM and NatWest, for example, it's quite intimidating. Sometimes even just going into the building where you've got huge columns everywhere, a reception desk that's a mile long, it's deliberately intimidating to show the status of that organisation. So what we did here, for instance, as Liv says, we took people to the Museum and Art Gallery in the Victoria Square, and we get people to talk about some of the exhibits and to bring some items about themselves and talk in front of anyone who happened to be there. So if you can be talking about one of those exhibits in front of just the public who are going around, you can pretty much do anything. You can walk into a boardroom in any company, in any part of the world, and hold your own. And we actually had, when we were doing some of these discussions about some of the artworks there, we'd have the public stopping, thinking that these guys were art students. They'd never seen one of these paintings before in their lives, but talked confidently about it and got a round of applause from the public going round. So fantastic experiences. And the negotiation challenge, a chance to get some professional learning from some very experienced contract lawyers, which stands you in good stead for any conversations you might be having later on in your career. Eunice, let me come to you, because your journey's been quite different. You joined us last year, and so for you it was quite different because all of the work that we did was across Zoom because, hey, a pandemic had come along which nobody was expecting. So for you, we were specifically tailoring the course for some roles with NatWest, and so you've been working with NatWest since, I think you started around about November last year.
Correct, yeah.
So you're working, supporting businesses who bank with NatWest in the kind of commercial field. Can you tell us a bit about why you chose this pathway and how working with LTSB has helped you to gain your career?
Yeah, good question. So with my career path, of course, with Max and Liv, that said, is totally really relatable. So it's a big difference with going to university and being exposed to a large organization. And just in that, it's just really incredible because you're literally being exposed in working for a large organization and you're doing tasks on a daily basis, which helps you with all the skills and credentials. That is really puts you in a good place for the future. With my career, I think I've always had the intention of pursuing my career in banking, and with the LTSB program, when we saw the NatWest program, it just stood out to me, and it was a really helpful for me because all the skills, the qualities that you bring into the role, LTSB has helped me all the way through. And that has put me in a position today where I can be able to support my customers and be really competitive at my job role. And of course, within the bank and also within the LTSB, you have so much support. And it's probably fair to say with Liv and Max as well, it's completely the same. So it's just been a fantastic journey, and really good credit to LTSB for what they've been doing.
Well, thank you. I think what we try to do as well, though, is as you guys know, getting into a job is one thing, keeping that job is something else. And so for you guys, if you've ever had any issues, if there's been, I don't know, if you've had a problem getting on with your line manager, if the study program has been tricky, you know that we're there in the background to support you with that as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite an important thing because these large organisations in particular won't necessarily always be as sympathetic to some of the things that real life can present. But let me kind of move on to thinking about the day-to-day experience that you have as an apprentice. Can you give me a kind of idea of your typical week? Because you've got to combine work with study. So what does that actually look like? And how do what do you enjoy about your typical week?
So my role right now, so I'm an assistant relationship manager. So I look after businesses who have a turnover from 2 mil to 50 million. So it's quite a very competitive job role because it's quite a high demand job role. But I mentioned earlier that the skills, the qualities that is brought from LTSB, it really helped me to thrive in my job role. And with my apprenticeship, there's so much support around the bank from my colleagues. It's all communication, so they're always more than happy to give me that time to study. And I'm actually being allocated to that time of study. On a specific day. So like one whole day I'm studying, solely focusing on my studies for my exam. And of course, if there are any problems, any concerns, then of course there's always people to go to. But this is the thing with large organizations, they teach you that professionalism from the very beginning. They tell you the pros and cons and what to look out for and what not. So there's always a lot of ways, solutions for you to go around things, and the support from obviously with NatWest and my studies is just incredible because whatever support you need, you can always go to them at any time, at any point.
So that's the thing. So you get about 20% of your week dedicated to off-the-job training. So that's ring-fenced for you to have that support. But you've also then got all the colleagues to learn from.
Yeah.
So whereas this being a university pathway where it's all study and you're not applying it, you've got that reinforcement of the learning by doing it in the job at the same time. Thank you. If you can pass the mic to Max. So Max, I'm going to ask you, your role is obviously very different. The types of things that you guys do are different. So can you tell us a bit about your typical week? What does that look like for you?
Yes,
and with the just to sort of round that out as well, how has your journey been over the past few years to get to where you are right now?
So at the moment, I'm currently in commercial audit. So my day-to-day is kind of doing the statutory audit for larger companies. My portfolio is mainly companies that turn over in excess of about 150 million. So they're quite big organisations normally. I guess day-to-day, probably like 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. would be like my audit testing. So like I guess liaising with the client, performing the testing, kind of writing up my results, telling management these things. And I guess at our firm we're kind of expected to do our studies outside of work. Although like we get time off to go to college, I'd say, well, whenever we need it, I suppose. It's kind of an expectation that we do study in our own time. So I guess realistically I'll probably end up studying from like 7 till 10 every day. And that's kind of the expectations of the firm. I think it's worth saying to people that think that they're going into an apprenticeship for like an easy ride compared to university. I think it's the complete opposite. University is obviously quite a doddle compared. They probably do like 15 to 20 hours a week, where I'd say that probably all of us here probably do 60 hours plus minimum with our studies. So it's not actually as good as people think it is, I suppose, in terms of like if they think they're going to get an easy ride going into an apprenticeship.
So I think that's a useful bit of a reality check in a way, in that, university, we all know some people don't turn up to all their lectures and no one necessarily tells them off, whereas with an apprenticeship, it is a job. So you have got to be working hard, you've got to be showing what you can do, but those studies are alongside that. Before I ask you to hand over to Liv, just one other question. Did you expect, when you were thinking about your career, that you'd be responsible for auditing businesses with 50 million plus turnover at this stage? Is this how you thought it would turn out, or has this been quite a journey?
Nah, so I definitely didn't expect it. I think I didn't even really understand my role even when I started. I guess if you don't do the correct research, you don't quite understand the job that you're actually going into. I think anybody that's looking to go into audit is a really good field to start with, anything finance, because you get such big exposure to because even on a day-to-day basis I'll be speaking to like CFOs, CEOs, and like kind of that exposure from when you're like 18, like you will not get that in any other job. So I think like it is kind of really, really weird when you're like an 18-year-old and suddenly you're thrown in front of a CEO of like a massive company, and it's like, this is scary, like there's no going around it.
Thank you. So Liv, if I come to you, so again, when in fact I saw you smiling at the idea of the kind of exposure to figures within business that you get. Can you tell us a bit about your job, how that looks, and the kind of what's fun about it, what's good about it, and also what's a little bit scary perhaps?
So I work in audit as well, and what I do is very similar to Max in terms of the companies. I focus on listed companies and some pensions. A day to day, it's very similar. I'll log on about 9 o'clock. I'll work through till about 6. But what differs between us for our studies is, I don't know if you do the same, we get a block. We'll have a block booking. So when we have an exam, they'll book a week or 2 weeks where we won't work, we'll have study all day, online or in person, and then they'll have us do our exam a few weeks later. So instead of having a day a week and constantly studying, it comes more in chunks, which I think has its advantages in the sense that it doesn't feel like that's your whole life is always studying. But then it's hard when you're working in a busy period and you're then expected to maybe work a bit of overtime, then study, then do your exam. So juggling that can be really tricky. I think the people that I work with are really, really good. Everyone's so helpful. No one wants you to fail. So they're so supportive. They'll answer any questions. And I think there's a misconception around managers and people above you, partners, that they can be really like stern-faced. But I think, and from my experience, it's the complete opposite. No, like everyone is just so nice. And I think they look out for you as well. They'll plan social events. They'll make sure that they'll check in on us, make sure that we're doing well, like mentally, physically. So I think they try to kind of take care of us in that way. I just think, again, being thrown into the client, it can be difficult sometimes if it's maybe not something that you understand as much and you've got to go and have a conversation about it, or you have a client who's maybe not as friendly. I think that can be hard to kind of have a conversation with, but it's part of the job.
So there's good support from the team within your organisation, but you've also got the fact that, I mean, you two went through the LTSB programme at the same time, and there's various other colleagues who went through it. So you've kind of built a network as well through coming through our programme itself. And Eunice, we were talking earlier about how we've had, we started working in Birmingham in 2015, so we've basically got 7 years worth of young people going through the same route. So it's a network within networks here that you guys can be supporting each other. And in fact, we're planning a reunion to bring people back together and learn from each other about their experiences. One final question, and we'll come back down the line. So starting with you, Liv. If you think back to the decisions you were making before you joined our programme, what would be the main tip you would have for someone considering doing an apprenticeship, considering joining a programme like ours? What would be the main thing you would ask your younger self to consider, or the main tip you would have for your younger self at the stage somebody in the audience might be right now?
I think I would probably just say take every opportunity that is given to you. If someone offers you anything, I would just take it and try and get as much experience as you can before you kind of thrust into the world of work.
So seize the opportunity, go for it, don't be shy, just go and talk to these companies, seize any opportunities that are available. Excellent, thank you. If we come back down the line, so Max, if you were talking to yourself back in the summer of 2019, what would be your main tip to your younger self?
Yeah, I think similarly to Liv, it's about opportunities. I think like the activity you mentioned earlier in the museum, when I was doing that at LTSB at the time, I was thinking, like, what the hell am I doing? Like, this just seems like so silly. But then when you actually get into the workplace, you realise, like, actually, I am confident to speak to people. Like, I do have the ability to communicate with my clients and things like that. So I think you need to see the bigger picture in all the smaller things that you do. Even at school, any of the activities that are available, just take advantage of them. These small things, these small wins will build up and you will become more employable. Because at the end of the day, when somebody looks at a CV, everybody's going to have good grades. Everybody's going to have done, I don't know, D of E, etc. It's these small little things that build up and actually make your CV stand out in the big pile that they're going to receive every year.
That's great. And this is why we do this sort of thing as well, to give people experiences to talk about in interviews. If in interviews, if they're asking you, tell me when you've done X, Y, or Z thing, it can be quite difficult if most of the things you've got to talk about are stuff you've done at school or maybe a Saturday job or something like that. But having these other things where you've been doing quite tough activities or stretching your comfort zone, it's exactly the kind of thing that employers are looking to hear. So although it may have felt a bit weird at the time, there's a logic behind it, and I'm glad it paid off. So Eunice, finally, to sum up for us then, so from your perspective, bearing in mind that you're you're relatively fresh in the role, so it's not quite as far for you to cast your mind back, but what would your main tip be to anybody right now considering going into an apprenticeship or joining a program like ours?
Yeah.
What would your main advice be?
Max and Liv really touched on some good points there, and it's really, really fair to say that to really, really research into what organisation or where you want to go into and what type of career you want to get yourself into, because during my experience, I researched, and it really, really does help because it portrays everything that you want to do. Because the job role that I'm doing and the responsibilities that come with it's something that I love, and I'm fair to say that everyone here says the same as well. So really, really research and it's a really, really good point to grab the opportunity in both hands, because we are so fortunate to be living here and with all these opportunities around us, and especially with what LTSB are doing, it's not easy to come. So I really appreciate everything and just take all the opportunities and do network, because when you do network and when you do speak to people, ask them questions, because you'll be very surprised of what their experience was and what their journeys were. So it's really, really helpful to do that.
That's excellent, thank you. And that leads us very neatly onto the fact you've got a chance, if you want to speak to these guys off the stage for a few minutes. They'll be with us over at our stand over there, and my colleagues and I'll be over there, literally just over there behind the pillar, all day basically. So thank you very much for listening. Can we give our appreciation to Eunice, to Max and to Liv. Thank you very much, guys, for sharing your experience, and thank you for listening.